How do you create content that's going to rank in LLMs and AI search? That is the question I'm asking Irina Papuc today on this week's episode of Search with Candour.
Do not outsource your authenticity, your brand's voice to any technology or tool. Do not just poop out a million articles written by AI and hope for the best. Try to focus on really great, high quality stuff because the bar is just going to get higher and higher on that. The most reliable avenue is to just make amazing content. That remains the true north no matter what. AI has this advantage of accessing the entirety of human knowledge. That's probably where this is going to lead. So they'll be able to achieve a lot greater accuracy than the average human. I worry about our tendency towards aligning with just a dictated answer. It makes us kind of intellectually lazy, right?
Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Search with Candour. My name is Jack Chambers-Ward and this is the podcast where I interview the best and brightest across the SEO industry to talk about all the interesting SEO topics that are happening in 2025 and beyond. I apologise for my voice. I am currently losing my voice, and you would think it would be from a gig or an illness or something interesting. No, I recorded a podcast last night about The Meg 2, the sequel to the Jason Statham shark movie, and I did a Jason Statham impression for the second half of it, basically for the whole thing, for about an hour straight. And all three of us have got croaky voices this morning. So this is a day after me recording an episode of Sequelizers, and now I can do a pretty good Jason Statham impression. So, swings and roundabouts, isn't it? Anyway, I will not talk about Jason Statham any longer on this podcast. I will talk about Irina Papuc, who is joining me this week. Irina is the co-founder of Galactic Fed, a fantastic agency, fully remote, by the way, agency, which is very, very cool. And we're talking all about optimizing your content for LLMs, for AI search, and what the future of AI search is going to look like. Irina is a fascinating person who has incredible history, including working at CERN and the Large Hadron Collider. I'm not kidding. We get into that in the interview. Don't worry. Literally has more physics experience than me, and I have an astrophysics degree. That's not something that commonly happens on Search with Candour. It's very, very cool to have Irina on. And yeah, we get into basically talking about AI overviews, talking about LLMs, ChatGPT search, perplexity, all that kind of stuff. How basically ranking and content creation is shifting now that we're seeing this shift towards more and more people using AI search engines and that kind of thing. And I think it's particularly relevant, obviously this was recorded a few weeks ago, but at the time of release, this element of ChatGPT growing and growing and growing. 5 billion searches, I think it is. No, sorry, it was 1 billion searches a week or something like that was the number that ChatGPT released. That is a pretty big number. That's like 1% of Google. Because Google has from what I understand, has 5 trillion searches a year. And then if you extrapolate that down, that then becomes about 1 billion is about 1%. So it's about 100 billion searches a week on Google and 1 billion searches on ChatGPT search. So it's getting pretty close to like Bing numbers, which is crazy considering it's been around for a matter of months and Bing has been around for 20 years at this point. And I think we're seeing maybe not necessarily a challenger to Google, but certainly something that's going to shift. It feels like the landscape is shifting. I feel like that is a big conversation that's happening at the moment. And where we will see that go in the next few years, who knows? But I think this conversation I have this week with Irina Papuc is super relevant to that kind of thing. And if you're looking into AI search engines and LLMs and all that kind of stuff, which you probably should be in 2025, to be honest, if you're working in SEO and search marketing, then this is a brilliant episode for you. And I will now hand over to myself to do an ad read before I get to my conversation with Irina Papuc. Did you know that Google personalizes many searches by city and Also Ask is the only tool to access live People Also Ask data at city level? Try for free at alsoasked.com. My guest this week has worked in digital marketing for over 10 years across email marketing, link building, and SEO. They have worked with brands like Descript, which I use as part of the editing of this show, by the way, Tenfold, ClickTime, Domio, and Up Council. They have been featured in publications across the world, including Forbes, Bloomberg, CNBC, and I first spotted them in SEO in 2025, earlier this year. They are the co-founder and managing partner at Galactic Fed, which is an award-winning and fully remote digital marketing agency. Welcome to the show, Irina Papuc.
Thank you so much for having me, Jack. Super pumped to be on your show.
Thank you for joining me. And I didn't put this in the intro on purpose, but usually when I'm doing this show, I have the most physics experience on this SEO podcast.
Cool.
I have a degree in astrophysics, so I'm sure some of the listeners and viewers know that already, but I haven't done physics since that degree. You, however, worked at the Large Hadron Collider at CERN. So I bow down to you and your superior physics. This is
Oh,
very
I
nice
bow
of you to
down to you
actually.
too. We've both left some physics behind like 28 lifetimes
I know,
ago.
right? It feels like it,
So
doesn't it?
don't ask me to derive anything these days, except maybe some SEO problems. But no, that was really cool. I was very grateful to have had the experience of being at CERN 15 years ago before they turned the LHC on. So before it was so radioactive you couldn't go down there, but I was able to actually climb down and take a peek.
Oh,
So that
wow.
was fun. And it's basically like Big Bang Theory, like confirmed. So like the show.
I feel like
So
you and I could just have a whole other separate conversation about physics and
for
just
sure.
nerd out about all that kind of stuff. But that is unfortunately for some, but fortunately for others, that's not what we're here to talk about this week. We are going to actually be talking about AI search and LLMs and actually optimizing for that growing side of SEO, I guess, in a way. Like it really seems to be the conversation of the moment, whether that's things like ChatGPT search being introduced, whether that's AI overviews, the adoption of AI mode that Google is testing now. It is a big, big topic. And I think we're going to get into a lot of different directions, a lot of different bits and pieces. And I can't wait to pick your brain and discuss it all with you, Irina. It's a very exciting topic. I think I
Oh,
touch on basically every week at this point, but it's nice to actually get a chance to delve in some detail.
yeah, what can I say? AI is having its moment now, and we're all eyes are on it, so happy to dive in.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. And I think AI overviews have been such a controversial addition. Well, not according to Google. According to Google, they're very popular and everyone loves them. According
Right.
to literally everyone else, not so much. But
Yeah.
if you do want to start thinking about AI overviews from an AI and SEO perspective, from your idea of like how do you actually optimize for that stuff? Is it different to traditional SEO practices? Is it different to, the introduction of featured snippets we saw a decade ago? Or is it kind of, the classic make helpful content for users and you'll get there eventually? What's kind of happening in the world of optimizing for AI overviews?
Yeah, great question. So before I get into the nitty-gritty of that, I just want to say this is a very thorny question, largely because we simply do not have the performance data, right, for AI overviews as we do for traditional search. So that makes it inherently harder to measure them. SERPs have a predictable format by now, the clear ranking system, but AI overviews can be constructed in an unlimited number of ways. Also, how you score a result if you appear in an AI overview is up to question. Um, which would technically be a position one on SERP, but the answer lists competing companies and puts you at say position four. So, how do you score a mention versus a citation with the link? How do you tie a mention of a brand name to a domain property in Google Search Console? These are some really big open questions that I wanted to start this with. And I don't necessarily have the answers, but it makes for a good thing. So at the moment, I think that we can only make some educated inferences, most of which are just really good SEO hygiene in general. The top one is you already said it earlier. Just like you would with traditional search, the most reliable avenue is to just make amazing content. That remains the true north, no matter what.
It's so simple, right?
Big surprise, right? Yeah, very simple. If I were to answer that a bit more detailed, I'd say just try to be super helpful. Like, try to be an empathetic writer and really get in the shoes of your readers and ask yourself, what do these people want? What do they want to read? What helps them? And focus on that. So, there's nothing I can give you more as far as advice than to focus on creating great pieces, focus on quality over quantity, do not just poop out a million articles written by AI and hope for the best. Like, try to focus on really great, high quality stuff because the bar is just gonna get higher and higher on that. Second of all, boost your brand recognition. That will definitely be a trust signal to Google, as it already is, and to other LLM providers. The more times that you can get mentioned across different venues on the internet that are super relevant to your brand, the more likely you're going to appear in LLM training data, which is going to increase the likelihood that your brand name will appear in chat generations. So focus on high quality, relevant brand mentions. Um, and another thing I wanted to add is that Google is providing the AI overview and the citation links provided in the overview. They strongly correlate with search rankings. Often, the very first citation given is the top ranking result of the query. I don't know if you've noticed that, but that's an important thing to note as well. So everything that you're doing to optimize for regular Google search should probably also help you appear in Google's AI overviews. This would be my educated guess right now. But with that being said, I think there are some instances where AI overviews act counter to what Google would normally give you in a SERP.
Hmm.
If you have a manual action on your site, for example, you're going to disappear from regular organic search, but not necessarily from an AI overview because AI overviews don't care, and they're still going to mention you anyway. So just wanted to highlight that there are definitely edge cases too. So that's my
Yeah,
answer.
I love that kind of stuff where you get those weird little edge cases. I know people like Glenn Gabe and Lily Ray have been doing a lot of those studies of like, oh, like this site has a manual action, but it's still, like you said, is still appearing in AI
Exactly.
overviews, showing that it's not quite a one-to-one relationship. But exactly as you
Yeah.
said, so much of I was looking at a study the other day. There was the top 4 ranking domains account for like 50 to 60% of the overall like citation links in an AI overview as well. So it's a
Mhm.
pretty significant correlation, let alone going through the rest of the, the traditional page 1 of the top 10 ranking domains. There's that real kind of correlation and element there where I don't know, I think a lot of people were hoping for a lot more digging around further down the rankings, I guess, like seeing lower ranking
Mhm.
domains appear a little bit more, which I think we have seen a little bit of.
We
But the
have, we
statistics,
have.
yeah, I
But
think the
it still
statistics,
it
you're
still
right.
remains off. Like, it still remains
Yeah.
off. I think it also has to do with the fact that LLMs are based on training data that is the internet. So, naturally, there's gonna be a lot of overlap, right? So it'll be interesting to study those patterns and how they evolve over time. But for now, that seems to be what's going on.
Yeah, definitely. I think and how they evolve over time is kind of where we saw Google recently at time of recording announce AI mode, which seems to be the
Yeah,
evolution, the next step of AI overviews after, like I said, how successful they've been already, and they're used by more than 1 billion people, and all this
right.
kind of
Everyone's
happy
doing
happy
cartwheels.
Google PR stuff. Yeah, exactly, exactly. And then introducing AI mode, which seems to be an even more expanded version of that. If you take almost like the featured snippet to be the little kind of like egg
Right.
that then turns into the growth of AI, is this is the next evolution in that. I'm
This is
thinking
the
about
hatchling.
Pokemon terms.
Yes.
Exactly.
It
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's going
It will
through.
soon crawl to shore, and begin life
Yeah,
anew on
exactly.
land. Yes.
Exactly. This is the aquatic mammals climbing to land. Exactly.
It's
Do we
finally
think
shedding its gills, yes.
Oh god, if I see that in some marketing, I know they listen to this podcast now. They'll
They
they'll
do,
have to
yep.
credit you, Irina, exactly.
We're trying to hack the system right now, by feeding it these gill information. Let's hope it sticks to the LMs. Yeah.
Exactly, exactly. And I guess a bigger question for the future of search is, do you think AI overviews are here to stay because Google keeps
Hmm,
talking about how positive it is and how much everyone loves them, despite again, maybe it is a little case of our kind of echo chamber in SEO, right?
sure.
Our little digital marketing bubble of like
Novelty.
we're very switched on and we're very aware of what's going on, whereas most people outside the industry are probably just carrying on. But I have definitely seen people who aren't in
Mhm,
SEO talk about this stuff. It has come up on podcasts I listen to that are not SEO related at all, where they're just
totally.
talking about something else, and then they're like, "Oh, Google's really bad at the moment, isn't it?" And everybody goes, "Oh, normal people realize it too. It's not just us SEOs. Oh, wow."
The normies are onto it. The normies are onto it. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Um, no, that's a very important question, and I'm gonna give you two answers to that. I think short term versus long term is there's a bit of a deviation there. So short term answer is maybe, as long as it doesn't cut into Google's ad revenue, right? Practical. AI answers to questions can easily consolidate enormous amount of relevant information from a lot of different sources, which definitely gives them an edge over traditional search, which usually requires you to click into results and do all this like heavy lifting of finding the right answer. Um, and I think it's very easy for people to want to take shortcuts and to just want an answer. I've heard plenty of folks outside of SEO talk about how they spend like literally all their time now on ChatGPT getting answers. So yeah, I definitely think it's going beyond just the SEO people. I do want to note that hallucinations are still going to be an issue, but I think it's gonna be a diminishing one. You've kept up with some of the grounding features that Gemini and ChatGPT have put in place, like adding links and stuff. So I think they're doing a lot of work to clean that up. I think it's clear by now that many users definitely trust AI answers enough that if there are hallucinations, it's not a barrier to usage, even if no improvements occur, which they are. Um, Also, I wanted to note that, we humans get things wrong too, right? So there might come a point where AI having this advantage over us little, feeble little monkeys on this earth, AI has this advantage of accessing the entirety of human knowledge. That's probably where this is going to lead. So they'll be able to achieve a lot greater accuracy than the average human. So I think the rate of hallucinations can potentially dip below the rate of human error. We haven't gotten to that point yet, but that's a very, very big possibility in the future. So that brings me to the future, long term. I do think that long term, the trend is going to be going towards answering users' questions with natural language. I think the internet is going to become increasingly more and more invisible, in the sense that it's going to be behind the scenes, and what we will be served up will be agents helping us, make use of it and pull out what we need to pull out at a given time. If you take, for example, how all the super intelligent AIs in science fiction work, it's kind of what we aspire towards, right? So this might take on the form of AI overviews or something more sophisticated that is beyond what we can currently see or imagine. Or it might just be a gradual exodus of users coming in from traditional search engines towards the chatbots. Or it might even just be a wholesale overhaul of how we share information digitally. But I think the general trend is here to stay. I think natural language is going to play an increasingly dominant role in how we harness the internet information, right?
Yeah, definitely. I think you're absolutely right about and it's definitely a topic I know I talked about it with Itamar Blauer a couple of months ago when we were talking about the evolution of the way we search. Like you said, that
Mhm.
conversational style, that natural language we see, and talking to people, like I said, who aren't in SEO, friends, family, all that kind of stuff, who are
Grandmas.
using ChatGPT.
Yes.
Exactly. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Anybody and everybody at this point. I was like,
Yeah.
do you talk to it in the same way that you Google stuff? Do you type in, you know, best, I don't know, best sci-fi books 2025?
I
Are you,
find
or do
myself
you like
doing that, but I'm a millennial, so I'm still stuck in
exactly?
that
Yeah.
like Neanderthal time of, helping Google
So
figure it out in the 90s or
yeah,
whatever.
we're stuck in, I guess, in a way, like, and you and I growing up in the era before in the internet and seeing the internet arrive and being aware of that
Exactly.
process and how
Yeah.
much that has changed, right? You think about the top level searches that were happening 20 years ago. It was like literally just best sci-fi books. I would never type that into Google these days, right?
You have to
You would
spell
never
book
just do a
right.
exactly. Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, yeah, exactly. You then have to be a bit more nuanced and a bit more subtle. And I think I know speaking to other SEOs, all we're kind of aware of how to search for stuff. I don't know if you have this as well, Irina, but people come to you and be
Mm.
like, "Oh, I can't find this thing," and you go, "Right, fine, I'll find it." You type a thing into Google, you search in a specific way, and then you're
Yes.
able to find the thing for that person. I am
I do
basically
this
my
for my
parents' own
grandparents
Google at this
literally
point.
every day.
Exactly, exactly.
I'm their prompt
But with that
engineer, you could say.
but as we shift into that conversational, like, mode, that should feel more intuitive and more natural, right? But I
Yes,
think because we've trained ourselves as internet users over the last 20 years, then we
the
can
damage is done.
we exactly, yeah, we're already set in our ways, right? We've already got that habit of, "I know what I need to type into Google to find this thing." But if you type that
Exactly.
into ChatGPT search or Perplexity or whatever it is, you get totally different things. And I find
Mhm.
myself more often than not, like, using the actual dictation function and actually speaking to it out
Oh,
loud, which is
yeah, that
something that
tricks you
seems,
into having to have a fireside chat versus, like, trying to
yeah.
hack the system with simple words.
Hey, so I'm thinking of doing this thing, and I would never type, "Hey, I'm thinking of doing this thing,"
Right.
into into a Google search bar. That would melt my brain. That makes no sense to me. But actually
Yeah.
having that conversation and feeling like you are having a conversation, like we are now, you speak in a different way than you type. And I
Yeah.
find that stuff fascinating that, like you said, when the internet is a bit more invisible to us and there's that
True.
distance and that layer between the user and actually the back end of what's going on, are we then
Yes.
kind of losing all of the lovely keyword data that we have, all of the search data that we have? Like, oh, that roughly so many people search with this particular search volume for this phrase because everybody kind of uses similar phrases. But if everyone is conversationally searching, that would diverge and divest like how people phrase stuff. Like, you would search for the same thing as I would, but not necessarily in exactly the same way. I'm British. I know
Yeah.
you grew up in the US. Like, we
Right.
would have very different ways of wording things or slight different spellings and all that
Sure.
kind of stuff. So it could massively vary there as well.
Yeah, no, I feel you. I also think that, with every era, there comes its own unique tools.
Mm.
So nonetheless, regardless of what how the waves of technology splash, I think there's gonna be tools out there predicting, working just like there's already papers coming out talking about how to SEO your way through LLMs. There's studies being formed. I have no doubt that those will eventually lead to new SEO products. Um, that we haven't yet seen on the market. So it's just gonna be a different game we play. Um, but no, it definitely changes the playing field entirely. The goalposts, the turf, everything. Kind of flips it on its edge. So
Yeah. You hear, like, moving the goalposts, but changing the turf is like, uh-oh,
it's
that's the
more
serious
than
thing.
that. The turf is taking on a new genetic formation, let me tell you.
Exactly, yeah. We're moving to AstroTurf now, like, this is a big change.
AstroTurf, yes. That's right.
I think, you mentioned brand mentions earlier, which I think is something, again, I think
Mm,
a lot of people are thinking about when it comes to LLMs, when it comes to that sort of thing, because so many people, we've talked about unlinked mentions in SEO for years and years and years now, and the weighing up of the
yes.
value of a linked mention versus a fully linked mention, or a no follow link versus no link at all, and all this kind of stuff. I know you touched on this in your SEO in 2025 conversation with David at Majestic, and that conversation really sparked my thinking of, like, how valuable are citations in things like ChatGPT search and Perplexity and
Mhm.
AI overviews if they're not linked? Sure, we can get the citations, like you said, you kind of get the little sidebar and the breakdown, stuff like that. But
Yeah.
as you grow your brand, as you mentioned, how valuable is that to still keep getting mentioned but not necessarily linked to? Is there a benefit to your brand awareness and stuff like that in the same way we would see in traditional search?
Yeah, okay, so brand mentions, are they more important than ever? And my answer is I absolutely believe so. Um, and I touched on this a bit earlier. It's the fact that LMs do not give a hoot about links. Um, if you have high quality, relevant brand mentions on like sites that really matter in your space, and that are respected, have strong EAT, authority, etc., those absolutely play a role in training LLMs to see that your brand is worth mentioning in their results. Um, I think it's possible that for a while we could see this kind of new quote Wild West, where much like much like the SEOs used to spam everywhere, right? The links, LLM can be kind of gamed a little bit somewhat early on by spamming mentions regardless of quality. Um, but this isn't gonna last. Google figured out the game with the links, and then really hit down on that. So it's probably gonna do the same with the text mentions. So I wouldn't advise it. So I think honestly, like as always, true north, context, honesty of the mention, where it is hosted. All of these factors will play a tremendous role in the weight given to a mention. And I think that also Google can bring back the punitive measures they gave to spammy manipulative links and apply them to manipulative mentions. So to anyone out there listening, I advise you to go hard on your brand mentions, but make sure that you are applying, really strong quality standards on what you're getting. Kind of like you would with traditional PR.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a conversation we had with the digital PR team here at Candour. Like,
Yeah.
there's definitely an element where I could almost see a future where, as the growth of brand mentions becomes more and more important as the growth of AI search and LLMs grows, does that counterbalance? And I know you hinted at it just now. Are the traditional backlinks going to become less
Mm.
important in that sense? Is there kind of a correlation point where they kind of cross over and actually now brand mentions are more important and links are less important in that sense? I'd be fascinated to see, like you said, will we see a new era of link building and PR in that way that focuses on brand mentions? Don't worry about linking to me, just mention me on your article. Like, that's a fascinating future, I think. Do you think that's possible?
Yeah. Yeah, no, I could see that happening. I have a lot of thoughts to share here. So I actually began my career as a link builder. I was the link building queen for a long time, and at a few companies I worked with. So it's funny to see that kind of on its way out. I think that right now in 2025, because that's what we're talking about here, backlinks are still pretty important. I would still incorporate that as a strategy, simply because we still have Google search. It's still the dominant search engine. Anytime, as long as we have search engine set up, links are still going to be an important factor. However, I think the reliance on links as a measure of trust will diminish over time. I think before link-based ranking algorithms were the main driver of search engines, there was just a lot less reasons, I think, for links to be spammy, which is what made them such a great way for to kind of have folks like Google crowdsource genuine opinions on which sites and pages were worth ranking. Um, but now we're decades deep into this arms race, between SEOs, all trying to get links. And I think search engines and it's greatly eroded the reliability of links as an honest signal. It's even gotten to the point where Google has openly loosened the treatment of no follow links. I don't
Mm.
know if you kept up with that, but and it doesn't really treat follow links as a top ranking signal as it once did. And I think that this could be heavily debated, so I wanted to preface that as well. Because Google spokespeople, right? They have this every incentive to muddy the waters around what makes an algorithm tick. Because they don't want SEOs like us to game it in any more than they already have. So um, I also think that currently LLMs depend on search engines to provide citations and up to date information. That's more recent than their knowledge cutoff. So that's an important point too. So in that sense, I think SEO best practices for Google are still going to apply. You still want to appear in the index as often as possible in order for an LLM to discover your content. And LLMs will generally prefer citing, super high ranking pages over lower ranked competitors. So that's the key, I think. I think provided that search engines are still an important and crucial part of search, links are still going to be a valuable factor to tie into your strategy. But still, I just want to end with the idea that LLMs present a radical change in how information is compiled from the internet, parsed and presented. And to the extent that they are decoupled from search engines, I think the old SEO paradigm goes out the window. So only so long as these two are coupled, I think we're going to see the links being an important driver, which is the case
Yeah.
still today.
Absolutely, yeah. I think it's like you said, Google tend to say, "Oh, links are less important now. Links are less important." Each year, a
Right,
new, representative of Google, a new member of the search team will say, "Oh, links are less important
right.
now." Like, Yeah, sure, but they are still important, as you said. Like if we're having conversations with clients, if I'm talking to people in 2025, I still think they are a significant indicator and a significant ranking factor that you should be
Yes.
factoring into your strategies. But how
Yes.
much that will change and the nature of things like digital PR and things like link building will shift in the next few years, I think you could be right, mate. Like you could absolutely look into a world where the value of those links becomes less and less. Like you said, initially when
Yeah.
PageRank was introduced and this shifted towards a link based kind of algorithm, it was this democratization of the internet. Like, oh, you know that
Exactly.
other sites vouch for these sites, and like you said, you essentially crowdsource value and trust and authority in
Mhm.
the even before EEAT.
It
That
was
was the whole thing.
beautiful.
Like, yeah. That was the lovely democratized side of the internet, right? That was
Right.
what we all dreamed it would be. This lovely network of everyone helping each other out and vouching for each other. But spam
Exactly.
came along, and it's easy to. We now know, obviously, known for decades, it's a ranking factor. So it's manipulated, it's shifted, it's paid links all over the place, and all this kind of stuff. Could we see almost a shift back towards the pre-link days, like where links are far less important, and when you, like you said, when you get to just brand mentions or even just creating good content, and content is by far and away the most important thing, let alone the most
I
important thing.
think to this day, content still remains by far the most important thing,
Agreed.
simply
Yeah.
because you cannot have anything else without that. Like, as far as, like, true north principles. So, that's there to stay. The other things are questionable largely around how tech will evolve, and like I said, this decoupling of engine versus LLM, like, that remains to be seen. Um, and there it's largely about, how is Google going to make its ad revenue? Is that even gonna matter anymore? Is there gonna be a new
Yeah.
revenue model in place? What will that look like? I think those are really big questions that we don't really know yet. We're a little too early in the game.
Yeah, I know Google have been talking about AI mode ads in a potential way. I don't know how that will be integrated or how that works, but there has definitely been conversations that are now being
Yeah,
discussed in. Barry Schwartz has covered that a couple of times in the last couple of weeks of like, this seems to be a thing they're moving towards, and then they announced AI mode, and it's like, this is what they were talking about. This could be the evolution that almost allows, like you said, the addition of ad revenue, and that is the incentive for Google. We say this every time on the show.
yes,
Don't forget that is where Google makes all of their money. They
one
don't care
trillion
about us
percent.
organic SEO people. They don't care about us link builders. They don't care about us content creators. They care about ad spend. They care about ad revenue. And the last time I checked, $260 billion or whatever they made from
Yeah,
ad spend.
I've
It's
lost
an
count, but yeah.
unbelievable amount of money. I was like, yeah, and how much do you think they make from organic stuff? Basically nothing. There is a huge
Yeah,
incentive there, like you said, to make this stuff monetized from a Google perspective. And I want to
totally.
float two slightly different theories, because one I only saw this morning, which was a paid for search engine called
Hmm,
Kagi, Kagi. I'd
interesting.
never heard of it before. A friend of mine, Brandon, recommended it to me because it is literally, you get 100 searches on a free account. I think if you pay, I'm making these numbers up. I don't
Yeah,
quote me off the top of my head.
sure.
It's like $5 for 500 searches, $10 for 1,000 searches, and $20 for unlimited searches. So you're actually paying by the number of searches, which I find interesting. And the other one that was brought to me
Interesting.
from Arnout Hellman's, which I thought is a terrifying but interesting idea, is basically turning it into Netflix, where you get like an ad-free paid for version, and it includes ad version, where every
Mm.
5 searches you get an ad that is a full screen, like, hey, by the way, here's an ad, and you have to skip it, kind of thing, almost like a
No.
YouTube or a streaming service, right? It
Yeah,
doesn't, that sound horrible? But the more I
sounds
think of it, I think, oh,
dystopian.
that sounds, yeah, everything sounds more dystopian these days, mate. But like, dystopian becomes suddenly quite believable. I'm like, oh, I could
Well,
definitely
here's the
see
thing
that.
to keep in mind. To bring it back to the sunny side, I think no matter what, whether it's, OpenAI, Google, whatever, whoever is gonna be the next big dog in search, they're gonna care about the user experience. Because if people aren't enjoying the experience, if they're not feeling like they're getting value, if they feel like their time is being wasted, there's gonna be a tipping point there where users just bounce. So even though you're absolutely right, Google does not care inherently about us SEOs, they want to generate the ad revenue. They absolutely do care about the user experience. And that's where this interesting sort of arms race between LLMs and Google is fascinating, right? Because um, nowadays, at least me personally, I just don't feel like Google search is really scratching my itch, you know? I get really great
Yep.
answers from Claude or whatever, um, ChatGPT, like that satisfy my search needs. So it's going to be really interesting to see how Google steps it up to provide even greater value and bridge that gap of user experience that we're starting to see.
Yeah, definitely. I think when we saw the announcement of AI overviews and the push towards Gemini and that now sort of infamous Google I/O announcement with Sundar Pichai being like AI, 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 every other word was AI, and it felt like, and again, I touched on this with Itamar a couple of months ago. There was that kind of feels like Google kind of been caught with their pants down a little bit. They got a little bit too comfortable. They gotten a little bit too like, yeah, we're the
Yeah,
big dog. We're 90+% in search
infallible.
dominance. We don't need to worry about it. And then OpenAI show them like, by the way, we've got a search engine. Like, oh no, oh god, we need to do something. Oh no,
Ring
we
the
need
alarm, yeah.
exactly, yeah, yeah. And obviously, I'm exaggerating. I'm being facetious. That they obviously
Sure,
didn't just make Gemini overnight. That's not how technology works.
sure.
But it does feel like a lot of the stuff we're seeing, obviously, we talked about the inaccuracies we've seen in AI overviews, the issues we've seen, and the way Google has questionably handled that from a PR perspective as well. But it
Mhm.
does seem like a lot of this stuff is being rolled out maybe before it's ready. But I think it's interesting what they're doing with AI
Wouldn't
mode,
be
as
the
we've talked
first
about
time in
earlier. Well,
humanity.
exactly, right, right, exactly. It seems to me that they're doing the rollout of AI mode a little bit more slowly. It's like, oh, it's
Mhm.
for premium one subscribers that you can go in and choose to turn it on in the lab section of your Google
That's
account.
the
It's
advantage
not
of being an underdog. You've got time. You've got
exactly,
nothing but
yeah.
time. You can refine your process and you can come in, like a Trojan horse full of soldiers ready to pop out. So it'll be interesting to see, how that more intentional rollout happens and how everyone and their grandma reacts to it because it's certainly easier to use. You don't have to go through parsing pages and pages of results to find what you're looking for. But I also worry, and I've brought this up in some previous podcasts. I worry about our tendency towards aligning with just a dictated answer. It makes us kind of
Yeah,
intellectually
absolutely.
lazy, right? Like, I'm gonna feel nostalgic at some point when I'm an old lady with a cane looking back at the sweet days when you could look at primary sources and you could do your own research to figure out what might be right. You still had access to this like behind the scenes look at the internet, you know? When you strip that away and you just have this entity dictating to you an answer, it's a little frightening. So I hope we'll still have the ability to go back to the primary sources to check our information because
Yeah,
it's a
absolutely, yeah.
really, really chaotic time, even more than now, of misinformation. So yeah,
Definitely, yeah. I think you're right with that kind of using the word dictator there appropriately because, like, who controls that system? Who watches the Watchmen, right? Like, how does that?
right,
We will get the tech billionaire companies and all the big conglomerates that control the data and control all this stuff, deciding, like you said, the de facto answer to a question. And
right,
for years, granted, that kind of has been Google. And to the point where it became its own verb, right? To Google something is to search
right.
something. That's how synonymous it has been with search for the last
Yeah.
20 years. But now people don't use that necessarily. I think I brought this up a couple of times. There was a study a little while ago that Gen Z and Gen Alpha use the term search instead of Google because they
Mm,
tend to search on social media platforms. They tend to, and now they are searching on
yes,
ChatGPT and other things as well. So they're not
sure.
as kind of confined to the Google ecosystem. Like, so unfortunately, sorry, Irina, us old millennials are with our canes and our walking sticks and our first-hand research
Yes,
back in the day.
totally.
And-
Back when it
but
was
it
cool.
exactly,
No,
yeah,
and
yeah,
that
yeah.
also makes them a lot more likely to jump ship. Like, it's not a thing that they grew up
There's
with.
no brand loyalty, right? Yeah,
There's no
exactly.
exactly, there's no real brand loyalty there. They're a lot more open, and this feels a lot more native to them because it's what they know, especially for the alphas. So it'll be very interesting to see how general search goes just by what you said. Yeah. Hmm.
Is that the next stage of like the democratization of search? Is then I mean, even to get into not to get into the legal side of things with Google and the whole antitrust thing and all that kind of stuff, but that could certainly
Sure.
have an effect on it, and we end up seeing, like you said, a next generation or the generation alpha or the following generation not have any particular loyalty to a particular ecosystem or brand or anything like that. So you can just be like, I will search for it on one of my 10 chosen things. And you are just
Hmm.
as likely to search on one thing. Whereas take me back 10 years and what am I going to use? Bing? Don't be ridiculous.
Who
What, I'm
are
going to use
you?
DuckDuckGo? Like, yeah, exactly. Like,
Ask
I'm going to
Jeeves.
search it
Let's
on
go.
Yahoo. Yeah, exactly. Will we
No,
feel
it's
the same way
yeah.
about that in 10 years that we do now? Like, oh, ask Jeeves, will Google or, something like that. I'm sure Google won't quite go that way. It's a slightly different scale to Ask Jeeves and Google, but you can
Yeah.
see what I mean, right? I wonder if people will even be aware that it was an option
I really
previously.
hope the future brings a diverse culture of different possible venues for search. I think heading towards a monoculture, like the thing you described of, in the future, there's like 10, 15 different platforms to get your knowledge. I really hope that all those platforms are owned by different entities that are competing with each other. And I hope that we continue to sustain a non-monoculture world. Um, because I think that's where we still have the likelihood that there's going to be at least some space in there where, folks are gonna be able to do their detective work and find the right answers, whatever they are. I'm frightened to see a world where there's literally one single company owning every search platform. Then you have a centralized system where anyone can come up with and game that from the inside out. So, but now we're deep into the doom space. It's come full circle.
Exactly. Well, let's cheer ourselves up a little bit, I guess, and touch on something you mentioned earlier about EEAT and how much
Mm.
those signals have become a part of SEO and the conversation we have about making content helpful, making it helpful to users, and all that kind of stuff. Do you think
Sure.
that those kind of signals, like we said at the very beginning of the show, good SEO will continue to be good SEO? Do you think those kind of factors, when it comes to experience and expertise, improving yourself, and all that kind of thing, to gain trust in the audience, will still be important when it comes to the growth of LLM search and AI search?
First of all, Jack, nothing raises my mood more than talking about EEAT, so you nailed the topic
There we
there.
go. There we go.
Um, I think in the sense that you will still need really great, engaging, well-supported, honest, helpful content, and the signals that you are an authority on what you're talking about, right? Just going back to the most basic fundamentals here. I think absolutely EAT is going to be playing into it. I think Google's specific EAT guidelines are not going to matter though, at least outside of Gemini and any other Google-owned models. But I think the more basic underarching idea is still going to hold, if that makes sense. And I also hate to say it, but I think what will probably matter more than trying to model your content on EAT or any other Google guideline is going to be volume. I think LLMs are trained on huge corpuses of data, text data specifically. Although I can totally see a near future where it becomes more multimodal. And without the structure of anchor text, links, HTML, directives, any other web specific architecture, the usual stuff that guides Google's guidelines, um, I think LMs are going to be basically a lot more predictive text on steroids, if that makes sense. I think they're going to determine the most likely next token given the previous text, right? Because that's how it works. Add it in and then reconsider all the text most likely. Sorry, and then reconsider all the text, including the new token that was just added. So the more a token appears in the training data, hence the idea that volume is an important factor here, the more likely it is to be selected in that context. So I know I went earlier and I said quality, not quantity, but, and this is where it's important, you want to have high quality stuff, but you want that conforms to these like fundamental principles behind EAT. But you also want to make sure that they're numerous, just because you know LLMs definitely play a role in seeing that. So I don't know if that helps answer your question.
Oh yeah, definitely. I think you said like the fundamental things that lie behind EAT. I think that's a key part of
Authority,
it
right?
because
Yeah,
exactly, yeah, because Google has talked about it so many times. Like EAT is not a ranking factor directly. That is not how this system works. That's not how it ties
exactly.
into how
It's
they've
more
now
like a
integrated
duh,
the
right?
exactly, exactly.
Yeah.
There's that element of I know it was a big conversation. This is definitely something I talked about, funnily enough, in my SEO in 2025 is about authenticity. And you
Hmm.
really get into that habit. I think a lot of us digital creators, whether we're doing podcasts or TikTok videos or writing blog posts or whatever it is,
Yeah,
you want to feel like the person talking to you is actually being real and honest and authentic and open with you, right? That is definitely something
totally.
I have built, for want of a better phrase, built my brand on as a podcaster over the last decade or so. Like, if you meet me in person at a conference, if we go for beers, if we hang out, if we play board games or video games, whatever it is, I'm kind of this as well. This is just me
Right.
all the time. Granted, I swear a little bit less on this podcast than I would at the
Sure.
pub or whatever. I try to keep it a little bit professional, but there is definitely that element, I think, of, oh, yeah, you get what you get. And I know what I know about. I can talk about podcasting or a bit outdated, but a little bit about physics and SEO and nerdy things and other bits and pieces because I've done those things. And I, like I said, we have that experience. How does that
Yes.
then kind of tie into, I know we saw when TikTok was being shut down in the US late last year,
Hmm.
whenever that was, you
Sure.
saw a lot of the creators being like, yeah, it turns out I don't actually do any of those workouts and I just faked it all and it's all crap and I just made it up. Anyway, see you
Right.
later, TikTok's dead. And they're like,
Right.
by the
Peace
way,
out.
TikTok's
Yeah.
back. You're like, yeah, everything's fine. I'm back to normal. Don't worry about that. And I think we're seeing
Right.
that we're almost like an era of like fake authenticity where you can be
Mm.
so online
That's
that
well
you're
said. Yep.
unbelievable in your authenticity. Like, I'm so lovely and wholesome and stuff. I'm like, are you though?
Then
If
you see
somebody is
the
too
weird
wholesome,
AI
I'm a little
generated
bit
third
suspicious.
arm coming out,
What
because it's
exactly?
actually
Yeah.
that because they're actually not
Always
even
always
real and
count
it's
the
just AI
fingers.
generated
Yeah.
video. That weird alien
Exactly.
limb
Exactly.
sticks out and you're like, "Oh, that was not a real human." I just for the record, I want to show you I have exactly 2 limbs. This is me. You can tell it's me because there's even little gray hairs forming in my hair. AI would hide those. So,
I've got some
but
gray
no.
hairs in my beard as well. I don't know if you can see that.
But to your
They're
point
happening as
though,
well.
fake authenticity is a great way of saying that. I and this is a drum I've been beating for a long time, Jack, in other interviews. Like, if there's one thing I have to say to folks out there is do not s- do not outsource your authenticity, your brand's voice to any technology or tool. Um, Learn to use the tools intelligently so that it enhances the authentic message that you already have and that you want to share with the world. But do not let that replace that. Um, you know, Eventually ChatGPT and all these other AIs, they're gonna get smarter and smarter and probably more and more human-like. Nowadays, they still cannot do humor, right? Irony and subtlety is where it's at, and we have yet to crack that nut with Claude, right? Um, so I see a lot of people just like point blank just outsourcing their website copy to AI. And then they get this like weird slop that's, most people can tell with half a brain, but this was not written by a human. There's too many adverbs, like the humor is weird, like stuff like that. So
Yep.
um, be smart about how you use the tools. Stick to your authentic brand voice as your guiding true north, and just let things branch out from there. And don't be afraid of shutting off all your electronics and just taking a walk through the park on a sunny day with little birds and like listen to the inner voice inside you about what you want your brand to represent. And then once you have a clear picture of what you want, then you open up the tech and the tools and everything and get to work. Uh, so that's my 2 cents. That's my spiel.
I I think that, yeah, you're preaching to the
almost like the saving of humanity there, right? That's where the human element and creativity and all that kind of stuff. You said humor, all that, the
Yeah,
little nuances that make human interactions and conversations different than just, as much as I joked earlier about like, oh, I just have a conversation with ChatGPT and it's like a person.
right.
It's like, it's not quite the same though, is it? It's not quite the same. It's not the same as, like you said, taking a notebook out into a park and just sitting down, propping yourself up against a tree and coming up with brand ideas or content ideas off the top of your head without
Exactly.
sitting around doom scrolling or typing in or talking to whatever LLM is your choice. There's that real element of, I know this is like the thing that we always talk about, like the human brain is the thing that separates us from artificial intelligence in many ways. And it's not, like you said, it's not artificial intelligence yet. It's not fully sentient. It's not really pushing the boundaries of what we have seen. The examples we still mentioned in science fiction earlier, like this
Yeah.
is not quite, you know, in those levels just yet. Maybe we will get there one day. Maybe we will head towards Skynet or little Haley Joel Osment robots or whatever it is. Like there's a lot of different directions it can go in, but I think, like you said, at the moment, you still got to find that humanity. You still got to find that balance and really make sure you are who you say you are, and don't have
Yes.
seven
Integrity.
fingers or whatever it is.
Yes.
Exactly.
I am the
Integrity is
multi-armed SEO goddess. Hear me.
integrity is a really good way of putting it. Actually, I think because, like I said, I think authenticity has kind of been bastardized and adopted by so many people,
Yeah,
where it's not really the actual end goal. It's just a, oh yeah, we'll just say we're authentic and it's fine. But actually, integrity, being honest with yourself about, and again, this comes back around to WAT. This comes back around to so many other things we talk about for good
yeah.
SEO stuff, like being honest about your products, your pros and your cons. Talk about what your products and services don't do as much as they do. There's that element there of like, be honest with your audience, be helpful, be open, be, be,
That's how we're
have
able
some
to get the
integrity.
word marketing and take it from being a bad word to being a good word, right? Marketing, it just
Exactly.
means
Yeah.
bringing things to market. And if you were to imagine an ancient Babylonian outdoor farmers market, right? You want to go buy some potatoes, and if that person's there and they painted some eggs to look like potatoes, you're gonna feel duped. You would not purchase with integrity from this farmer ever again. So the same principles of just doing honest business, those apply in whatever age with whatever technology you have at hand.
Yeah. It's bizarre that the same rules that applied thousands of years ago are still relevant now in
Yes.
2025.
Exactly. Yeah. So,
Nice. Well, let's wrap things up with the last kind of a new little introduction to the podcast. Some recommendations from you, Irina. Is there any particular tool or piece of software you've been using recently that you'd recommend for the listeners and viewers to check out? Maybe something they might not be aware of, or something you've really been enjoying recently that you'd recommend.
yeah, that's a really good question. I'm gonna talk about a tool that I've been using now for over, gosh, ages. And many of the people listening in probably already use it or know of it, but I just wanted to say I love it. We love it as a company, as you know, within Galactic Fed, Apollo.io.
Mm.
Amazing email marketing tool. Love it. Um, Phantom Buster is getting more and more interesting and intelligent. Worth checking out some of their latest features. Um, Experimentally, I'm kind of interested to see where these AI generated video companies are going.
Oh
This
God.
goes back to our whole talk about authenticity. And but they're getting pretty good. Like I played a little joke on my team a few weeks ago where I used, I think it was Hey Gen, to just record a video of myself talking, and I just put it out there. I'm like, "Hey guys, I made this over the weekend. What do you guys think?" And it fooled half the people, which is kind of scary. Uh,
Yeah.
but I wouldn't recommend it, for many of the reasons we've talked about in this very conversation. But I definitely think it's something to keep an eye on and see where the technology develops and how we can integrate it into our flows in the future, possibly in an honest and way where we're still again presenting a real story. Trying to think what else. Mm, those are the big ones. I don't really have any other ones that come to mind,
Nice.
but
Oh,
yeah,
that's awesome. Yeah, I think that I've been playing around with HeyGen and stuff as well. Like I said, I do a lot of video editing now, editing the podcast
yeah.
every week and things like that. So I'm always like, I don't
Icon.me,
know if I
that's
can.
another one. Icon.me
Oh
seems to
yeah,
be more interesting, actually. Um,
I will.
I've
I
been,
haven't checked that one out. I'll have to check that out.
yeah. So, but yeah, there's just a lot of. I'm really glad that we're further along than we were a year ago. A year ago, there were just so many like mediocre tools on the market. Now we're starting to see some really interesting stuff.
Yeah,
So
definitely.
if anyone's listening and if you felt a little jaded a year ago, like wow, everyone is pumping out an AI tool. They all kind of suck. Maybe take a look, revisit because things are starting to get a lot better and a lot more interesting.
Definitely, definitely. And the last little bit of recommendation, a video, a podcast, an article, a book, whatever it is, doesn't even have to be related to SEO or LLMs or anything like that. What's something you've been enjoying recently you'd recommend to the viewers and listeners?
Okay, so SEO wise, I'm a huge fan of Bernard Huang. He's been a
Mm.
little quiet lately, but the stuff he's put out is really, really interesting, very research driven. He's a great SEO. On the fun side, I recently discovered Yes Theory. I don't know if you ever watched that YouTube channel. But
No, I've not.
it's a couple of like adventurous guys who basically created a whole brand around them taking on an approach to saying yes to things, yes to the new
Oh,
experiences.
cool.
Yeah, so I've been having a lot of fun just like lurking on their YouTube channel. It's been really inspirational because in my free time, I'm a big traveler and they kind of embody some of the philosophy that I've had in my own life. So, yes, theory. If you want to check out some dudes doing crazy stuff for fun.
Nice. Amazing. I'll put links for both of those things, all the tool recommendations and everything else down below, video description, show notes. Go and check those out, folks. If people do want to follow you, Irina, they want to follow Galactic Fed and all the awesome work you're doing, how can they follow you? Where's the best place to find you on this increasingly AI generated dystopian internet that we live in?
Yes. Well, they can first of all pop open the bunker hatch, step out into this brave new world, and there they will see a billboard for Galactic Fed. It's www.galacticfed.com. That's my company. You can also follow me on LinkedIn. Also, if you hit me a message on LinkedIn and you say, "Hey, I listened to you on this podcast. It was really interesting. I want to talk to you. I promise you, I will have a conversation with you and hear what you're all about." So don't shy away from just reaching out to me directly. Even though
That's
I
how to
am
weed out
from
the spammers, right?
yes, everyone, Russian hackers, come my way, hit me.
That's a big proportion of the audience of this podcast. I'm sure it would be like
That's
all the Russian hackers, just like
right. Yes. Uh,
awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining me, Irene. It's been a pleasure. I'm so glad we finally got to sit down, have a chat, and
likewise.
discuss
No, this has
everything
been
from
great.
SEO and sci-fi to dystopian futures and physics and everything in between.
100%. No, Jack, this has been a real pleasure. And yeah, I hope we do this again. Thanks so much for having me on your show.
And that wraps up this week's episode of Search with Candour. Thank you once again to Irina Papuc for joining me. I think it was a really interesting conversation. Hopefully you got some really relevant tips and advice about optimizing for LLMs and the future of AI search. If you haven't already and if you made it this far, please do subscribe and like on YouTube, rate us 5 stars on Spotify, and give us a review on Apple Podcasts as well. I would hugely appreciate any engagement. Oh, you can also leave comments on Spotify now as well. That's a really nice new little feature that's been quite engaging and quite interesting. It's been fun to kind of turning Spotify into a bit more of a two-way thing than a one-way street. It feels like they're trying to compete with YouTube in that way. But yes, please do like, subscribe, follow, comment, all that good stuff. I would hugely appreciate that. Next week, I have a bit of a marketing podcast legend. One of my favorite podcasts, full stop, and my favorite marketing podcast is Marketing O'Clock. And one of the hosts of Marketing O'Clock, Mr. Greg Finn, will be joining me on this very show next week. And we're kind of picking up where we left off in my conversation with his co-host from It's New, Anu Adegbola. We're going to talk about basically the state of PPC in 2025, how that relates to SEO, and how that might predict some of the things that are coming around the corner for the future of SEO as well. Funnily enough, Greg and I recorded this conversation a few weeks ago, and we talked about ChatGPT ads and advertising in LLMs and all that kind of stuff. And since then, that has been announced and confirmed. They're working with Shopify and doing sponsored things and doing advertising and all that kind of stuff. So it certainly seems to be a predictive and forward-thinking conversation. So stay tuned next week. I am joined by the one and only Greg Finn from Cyprus North and Marketing O'Clock. In the meantime, like I said, thank you so much for watching and listening, wherever you're watching or listening. And hopefully I will have my voice back by the time I record next week. In the meantime, have a lovely week, and I will see you next week.